Hi, my name's Phil Coe. I'm the head of senior school at Morenci College in Canberra. The purpose of this video is to hopefully provide an understanding about how the ACT senior secondary system works. So I'd like to start by looking at how most senior education systems work around Australia and also around the world. The ACT is a bit different in the way that they operate. So all education systems have some kind of governing body, whether that's the Department of Education in that state or an agency that's attached to that particular Department of Education. That governing body will set the curriculum for each senior subject, and the schools adopt that curriculum and teach it to the students, and all of the students across the whole jurisdiction will be learning the same content. The governing body then usually sets the assessment tasks that all students in the state undertake, and then that assessment is then either marked by the school teachers and then sent off for moderation, or all of the marking is actually done by the governing body. The governing body then produces the grades for each of the students and produces the ATAR. However, in the ACT, it is a different model. So the Board of Senior Secondary Studies, the BSSS, do produce curriculum documents for each of the subjects. So up to this point, it is similar to every other state. The work that's being taught in chemistry at one school will be identical to chemistry at another school. So what is actually being taught will be the same, and schools adopt the courses in each of the subjects that they would like to teach. Where it fundamentally changes is that in the ACT, the schools themselves set the assessment task, which of course is based on the curriculum. So the assessment task will be similar across different schools, but ultimately they are set by the schools for their students. So there is not commonality with assessment tasks in each subject across the whole of the state. So students will then complete that assessment task. It'll be handed in, it'll be marked by the teacher. The school is then responsible for allocating a grade, A, B, C, D, or E, and the school is responsible for ranking the students that are at their particular school doing each of their courses. Those grades and rankings are then fed back to the BSSS. The BSSS then produce the ATAR and the ACT Senior Secondary Certificate and ACT Senior Record of Achievement based on the grades and the rankings provided by the schools. And I'll talk a little bit more about how they go about calculating the ATAR. As I mentioned in the previous slide, it is the schools themselves or the teachers that provide the grades for each student, and it is actually those grades that are awarded by the teachers that will end up on the certificate at the end of year 12. So to ensure that there is consistency, there is a grade moderation process. So the BSSS, as part of their course documents, have listed grade descriptors, which are the requirements for the allocation of an A, B, C, D, or E. Each semester, each school is required to submit a portfolio of work based on that semester's work, which is then reviewed by other schools as part of a moderation day, which happens each semester. So when these days occur, all of the chemistry teachers will get together. The work will be there from all of the schools from chemistry, and they will peer review the grading in each other's schools. It is not a requirement that scores and ranking are reviewed, nor is it a case of remarking the work that's been submitted. It is about whether the grades that have been allocated to a student fairly match the grade descriptors that are provided in the curriculum document. So in the ACT, Students can choose to undertake two different packages in their senior years. One of them is known as a tertiary package and one of them is an accredited package. Both of these have the aim of the achievement of an ACT Senior Secondary Certificate and an ACT Senior Record of Achievement. So identical goals primarily. Also, both packages do have an opportunity for the achievement of vocational certificates that might be embedded in the courses that the students choose. So some of the ACT courses as part of that are listed on the BSSS website can be delivered as vocational courses in addition to them being tertiary or accredited, and provided that the students then meet the requirements that those vocational certificates, they can achieve that as well. I guess the biggest fundamental difference is that students who are undertaking a tertiary package are aiming to be awarded an Australian Tertiary Admission Rank, or an ATAR. Students who are undertaking an accredited package will not get that number. So the ATAR is used for the direct entry using a main round offer into university at the end of year 12. So that's the biggest difference. Accredited students do not get that number. There is also the option in an accredited package, however, to begin an Australian school-based apprenticeship where students can begin their apprenticeship in a given field while they're still at school. It often involves a day a week outside of school in the workplace in the area that they're trying to achieve their certificate. But as I mentioned before, fundamentally, the ACT Senior Secondary Certificate and the Senior Record of Achievement is the same for both, and I'll talk a little bit about those two over the next few slides. So in order to achieve an ACT Senior Secondary Certificate and Record of Achievement, students need to complete a series of units. Now, a unit is a semester-long subject. That unit could be designated as tertiary or accredited. And as part of that particular unit, there will be a series of assessment tasks and students will achieve a grade. If it is a tertiary unit, students will also receive their ranking and their reflective position compared to all other students. Now, to achieve the certificate, students must complete 17 units. Now, at Marici, most students will complete 6 subjects in each semester in Year 11, which takes them to 12 just by the end of Year 11. Most students will then complete 5 each semester in Year 12, which is in excess of the 17. In order to successfully complete a tertiary package and achieve an ATAR, students actually also need to complete 20 units, but it's not necessarily 20 tertiary units, just 20 units need to be completed. Now, there are a number of course types. If a student completes 4 units in a given subject, which is known as a course, that is known as a major. So this example on the screen now looks at a student who has studied a subject all the way through Year 11 and Year 12. They've had it one each semester for 4 semesters, and this is the most common type of course. Students can also complete a minor where there's 2 units. The 2 examples have got a student studying a subject in Year 11 and then a subject in Year 12, but in theory you could do 1 unit in Year 11 and 1 unit in Year 12 and that would still be a minor. There are also some cases where students can complete a double major. For that to happen, the students would need to study 2 lines or 2 units concurrently throughout the whole of Year 11 and Year 12 over the 4 semesters. So in 2015, the name of the certificate which used to be known as the Year 12 certificate, changed, and students now receive 2 pieces of paper at the end, provided that they meet the requirements of 17 points. So this is an example of a senior secondary certificate, and the idea from the BSSS and the ACT government is to provide a certificate that could be framed and presented if a student wanted to. In addition to the senior secondary certificate is the senior record of achievement. Now this is very similar to what the Year 12 certificate used to look like. Now, down the left-hand side in bold are the courses that this particular student studied. And then within that are the names of the units that the student studied, and it's also got a list of whether it was a major or a minor in RE. Please note also that it is grades that are on this certificate, and there is no scores at all. Down the bottom, you'll see it's got college programs, it's got study group and pastoral care. In addition to normal units, which are tertiary or accredited, students do have the option of including registered units on their senior secondary record of achievement. Now, these registered units are a recording of any learning that has been done during Year 11 and Year 12 that is outside the classroom. From 2017, all of these registered units will need to be attached to the school. It could be, as this student has got extra study groups or pastoral care classes, it could actually be part of a music band. It could be tutoring younger students. It could be part of school sport. Generally, students will not need these to make it to 17 points or 20 points in the case of tertiary students. But they are a good thing for students to have listed on their senior record of achievement as the learning that they've done throughout Year 11 and Year 12. There is no grade associated with these, and you'll see that they're just listed as pass there. The point 2 really is a reflection of the time spent. In order to achieve a 1-point unit, the students need to complete 55 hours of study in that particular activity. Now, for this student, the study group, they will only have spent 11 hours, which is 0.2 of 55 hours. So everything up until now has really been independent of the package that a student has chosen to take. Students in tertiary and accredited are both trying to achieve the certificates that I've just discussed. However, the next few slides really is about tertiary packages and how an ATAR is actually calculated. So as I mentioned earlier, the ranking that is achieved at each school is ultimately sent through to the BSSS, who then scale those marks to ensure that there's fairness across the whole of the ACT. So the next few slides is a little bit about how all that works. Okay, so I'm going to start with how the calculation of a course score or a course ranking is determined. So students will generally undertake a number of majors, which is the most common form of course. In each of the semesters, they will undertake a series of assessment tasks, and they'll achieve a ranking for each of those. And then at the end of the semester, students will receive a scaled score, which is reflective of their position in that particular group. Now, this is not out of 100. That first semester, the student has not lost 26%. It is a number that allows them to compare their progress across each semester. So they've done the best in the last semester, but it will also allow them to compare their progress across different courses. Now, Students will then complete their courses and they will achieve a course score. Now, using the basic example, students study 4 semesters, you add them together, 295 divided by 4, and the student gets a unit average for that particular course. Now that is still a reflection of their ranking. It's not a percentage. But the BSSS have got a different way of determining a student's course score, and it is not purely based on an average. Now, this is called the 80% rule. What that means is the following. Students study 4 semesters within a major, each one is worth 25%. The best 80% is used to determine the course score for any given subject. Now, what that means in this case is that the best 3 semesters will count in full, because 25, 25, 25 gets us up to 75%, and it's the 74, 76, and 80. The last 5% comes from this worst semester, which is 65, and that makes up the last 5%. So if you think about 5 as a percentage or a proportion of 25, it means only 0.2 of that last subject will actually count towards the calculation of this particular student's course score. And look, it makes a bit of a difference. The previous one was 73.75. The course score for this student using the 80% rule is now 75.93. So that's made a difference for a student that perhaps has a semester that isn't as good as the others. If a student is absolutely consistent across every semester, the 80% rule will make no difference at all. But it does allow for most students, if they have a semester in a given subject that's not as good as they would like, it just has a bit of an insurance policy, I suppose. It also doesn't need to be the same semester for every course. So for this course in front of us, it's semester 3, but for another one, it might be semester 1 at the start of year 11. So I'm just going to jump across to talk about the AST or the ACT skills test, and then I'll tie that back to its relationship with course scores at the end of this, because it's the AST that has a huge impact on those final course scores that I've just been talking about. So, the ACT skills test is a series of 3 tests that the students undertake in September of year 12. The multiple choice and a short response, which is on the first day, and then a 600-word essay or extended response on the second day, on the Wednesday. Now, the AST is not subject specific, it is skills based. It is looking at assessing the students' higher order thinking skills, their comparison, analysis and evaluation and problem solving skills. Students are not really expected to bring any knowledge from the subjects that they've been studying to the AST. However, at their stage in year 12, it is expected that they've developed their skills in order to solve the problems that are presented to them in the AST. So here's an example of a question. There is some high school mathematics required, but it's not sophisticated, but they are expected to be able to work with fractions and percentages and so on. So this is a situation where there's a rule or 2 rules for determining the size of steps when building a staircase. Information is presented to them in a table and also in a diagram, as well as the rules are provided. So everything's given to the students, but they've then got to manipulate or understand what the rules are to then crunch out the answers. So there's some examples there, and I've actually done a video on the answers for this particular case, for this particular question. These are 2 separate questions, but again, another example where there is a cross-section of the Earth. Again, a whole bunch of rules provided up the top, and then there'll be some questions where the students would need to analyse what's been provided and come up with some answers. There also could be the one on the right, presented with a graph. That graph has got different axes on each side. One of them is truncated, so that would be a factor for determining the answers for something. And I mean, the legend in the middle provides information about what the graph represents. So in addition to problem-solving type skills, the students are also expected to demonstrate their verbal skills. So here is a question from a few years ago where a painting, a famous painting, has been provided and a poem. The questions then relate to the comparison of the poem and the image. Sometimes it could just be a straight passage, and it's looking at their comprehension and language skills and understanding the text that's been provided. And finally, this is an example of the stimulus material that is provided in the writing task on the final day. Now, if you look in the blue box there, that's got the instructions, but students are expected to write 600 words on the topic that's presented. Now, students are provided with stimulus material. I mean, the topic here is clearly a generation gap, but they don't necessarily have to draw information from this stimulus material. They could just present a 600-word essay on this given topic, and if they can bring things from outside of the stimulus sheet, then that shows an in-depth understanding of whatever topic it is, and ultimately will assess their writing skills. Now, the topic changes every year. The BSSS will also say that it's often a boring topic. It's not a topic that will evoke emotion in the students. So, and also a topic that perhaps not many students will know much about, or it'll be a topic that students know lots about. So there was a previous years ago, there was a one on social media, and there was I suppose an acceptance by the BSSS that all the students knew a little bit about that, and therefore no student was at an advantage. It's very unlikely to be slanted towards a given subject. So how does the AST actually impact the scores and ultimately the ATAR for the students? So the student will sit the AST. They'll do the 3 components, and each student will be given a score, an individual score for the AST. Now, that student score then contributes to the AST average in every single subject that the student sits. So all of the chemistry students' AST scores create a school average for chemistry. So there might be 20 students in that class, so 20 AST scores go in to create the mean for chemistry. The same will happen for English. There'll be a lot more in English, but all of the student scores will go into creating the mean for English, and that will happen for each of their subjects. Clearly, every school wants their students to do as well as possible, because we want the skills demonstrated in the AST to then flow on to create as high an average in each of the subjects for the AST. So what does that mean? If we look at this being 3 subjects, in each of these subjects, a student has finished 6th. Now, these 3 students who have all finished 6th should not be awarded the same score, because the strength of the groups will be different. And it's harder to finish 5th, or it's hard to win a medal in the Olympic Games for the 100 meters at the actual Olympics compared with the national championships. So although these students that have been highlighted have all finished sixth, their performance might not be the same. And if one group is stronger than another, then the student that finished sixth or in the middle of the strong group should be rewarded with a higher score. So here's an example where the blue group is stronger and the green group's the weakest and the red's in the middle. Ultimately, that the blue group student who's in a strong group of students, they've done well in the AST, should be rewarded with a higher score. However, you don't get a free kick on this. So some students will think, well, I should just try and get into strong groups all the time. Now, I mean, often we talk about subjects like physics and chemistry as being strong subjects. And you might even hear people say, I'll get scaled up if I do chemistry. Now, often it is strong students that choose to do chemistry, and the mean that students produce in chemistry is usually quite high, but it's not because it's chemistry, it's just because the type of students that choose it, usually. Now, so that a student is not advantaged by being in chemistry, if they are only choosing it to try and magically scale up, not only are teachers required to rank the students, but the gaps are important as well. And if you think about this last student in chemistry, if they were not engaged in chemistry, they don't like chemistry, they don't even like science, but they've chosen it because they think they're going to scale up, well, how do you think their performance would be in all their assessment tasks when it comes to the ranking at the end of the day? Now, what will actually happen is that student will not only be at the bottom, but they'll probably be way off the bottom. The same can happen in the green group. Sometimes students say, oh, I won't do a certain subject because I'll get scaled down. Well, provided that student can demonstrate that their skills are significantly better than the mean in that group, then they won't be disadvantaged. And if you think about, a 100 metres runner, the gold medal winner, if they were in a really slow race at an athletics carnival, well, their time is still going to be good. They'll end up winning by heaps. They shouldn't be penalised just because they happen to be in a slow running race. I guess the key bit of information here is that the ranking that the students achieve is based on their work in class, in their courses over the 2 years. It is not their ranking in the AST. So what could happen is that the student that comes top of this blue group might have actually had a very poor AST, but they will still occupy the top spots and get the highest core score because they have ranked at the top in their classes. Now, in reality, that doesn't happen all that much because the skills that are assessed in the AST are also the skills that are assessed in every class in Year 11 and Year 12. So there often is a very strong correlation between performance in AST and performance in classes. But it is ultimately all of the students determine the mean for the group and the strength, I guess where the red box is, but it's the individual performance in the assessment task that will determine the ranking for that particular course. So how does this work practically? The BSSS have decided that a mean of 150 is the average subject at the average school with the average students. That is the middle. And students will then generally receive scores between 80 and 220. So a student who receives 220 in all of their subjects, indicating that they're significantly above the mean in all of their subjects, and that will get you towards a 99 ATAR. Now, if you look at this as being 6 given subjects at a school, it could be that this top subject at this particular school has the students did better in the AST than the average. So that might mean that the mean for this particular subject might be 100 160, I suppose. Students in this subject didn't do as well compared with the average, and the mean was, say, 145. And there's a few other subjects that come in as well. So all this particular subject would indicate is that the students in the AST in this subject at this school were right on average compared with the rest of the ACT. And this one is significantly above, and this one is obviously below. Now, the students in each of these subjects, their performance and their ranking that's been sent through to the BSSS will then be laid over this particular mean. So the student that's been in the middle of this particular group in the assessment tasks, for this one that's highlighted, would receive a score of 135. Students that are significantly above the mean in that particular subject in the assessment task can still get a score up around 200. It just means that they would have to demonstrate that they're significantly above that mean. But given that the students have not done well in the AST, it means their higher order thinking skills are perhaps not brilliant, which means that for a student to demonstrate that they're significantly above the mean in a weaker group should actually be much easier than if it was the group above, which has the very high mean. And I guess this leads on to the changing cohort. If we've got a student that is exactly on the mean and they get a score of 150, and then some of the students who perhaps haven't done brilliantly switch courses and they change to a credit and they're no longer factored in to this particular cohort. This student who is now on the mean will actually move up if a whole bunch of strong students change into the course or a whole bunch of weaker students change out. But this student who was on 150 doesn't magically float with the mean and go up to 160. Their performance will stay exactly where it is and stay on 150. Because if the group's got stronger and their performance is the same, then they will actually be a little bit below average now. But the average has moved up to 160, so they'll actually stay in the same spot. And I think that's where there's a confusion sometimes, where students think, oh, I'll choose certain subjects to scale, as I mentioned before, that somehow if they're on the mean in a weaker group, they'll magically become on the mean in a much stronger group, as though their relative position is related to the mean and not to the other students that they happen to be competing against. Ultimately, what it means is that students need to be in the courses that they're engaged in, that they think they can perform the best in, and to demonstrate the skills that they have, because that student engagement will have a far bigger impact on the final score that a student has than trying to second guess the subjects. So I'm hoping this now will bring it together into how the actual ATAR is calculated. So students will study a series of courses. They will get a score between 80 and 220 based on their performance and their ranking in each of the courses that they've done. Now, if we look at the example on the screen, this student has done 5 majors and 2 minors. Now, based on their performance, they've received these scores, which is a reflection of their ranking in each of the courses that they've done. Now, to calculate a final ATAR, the best 3 majors will count in full. So these 3, 151, 156, and 155, the 3 best subjects will count. In addition to the best 3 majors, the 4th best subject can count as well, and that can be a major or a minor. Now in this case, it's actually the minor out on the far right. Now, what that means is that at most, only 1 minor can count towards the calculation of an ATAR. So at the end of year 11, a student can't tip out 3 or 4 subjects and start 3 or 4 new ones, because you'll end up with heaps of minors and still only one can count. You also start limiting the number of majors that you've got. Now, you don't have to select which majors are going to count. That will be done statistically. And it could be, if that performance in the 143 subject was a bit better, that could have counted rather than the minor. But it'll be your best 3 majors and then the 4th best subject. Now, the 3 majors count 100%, and the 4th best subject only counts as 60% of that particular course score. So this particular student has actually had 3 courses that won't count at all. Now, the learning is clearly important in that over the two years of year 11, year 12, or 1 year for this 132. But ultimately, only the best 4 will count. Now, I'll see if I can break this down statistically, but what this means is that 360%, you get 360% of the course scores. If you look at the percentage of majors compared with the entire group, you get 300 as a proportion of 360. Now, what that means is that 5/6 of a student's final score comes from the majors, and in the case of 4 majors counting, the best 3 majors. So these all count 100%, 3 majors, 151, 156, 155, and then 60% of the 150 will give you 90. Now, what that means is that this particular student's aggregate score is 542. The way the BSSS then operates, so it is then that aggregate score of 542 that is used to look up the ATAR score which the BSSS produced. Now, this is an example of one of the lookup tables that they've used in a previous year. It does change in a very minor way every year, but this is a pretty good indication about what sort of achievement is required to get each ATAR score. Look, so that's the end of this particular presentation. I hope it has given a bit of an understanding about how the ACT system works and how the calculation of an ATAR and the difference between tertiary and accredited courses. Thank you very much.